The Air Force's proficiency test cheating scandal is much wider than previously thought. 92 nuclear force officers are implicated out of a force of 500. The monthly exam tests officers' knowledge on maintaining and launching nuclear missiles. Deborah James, who was sworn in as Air Force Secretary just a few days ago, says this is just a symptom of major systemic problems.
I heard repeatedly from teammates that the need for perfection has created a climate of undue stress and fear. Fear about the future, fear about promotions, fear about what will happen to them in their careers.
Nearly 3 years into Syria's civil war, the Assad regime has killed at least 100,000 people and forced millions to flee. It crossed the red line by using chemical weapons. And as national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin reports, it's now dragging its feet on its commitment to dispose of those weapons.
When the Syrian regime used chemical weapons against its own people last August, President Obama called off a punishing military strike and cut a deal with the Assad regime to hand over all of its chemical weapons, a stockpile of more than 1,000 tons of toxic agents. Now it turns out the Assad regime has only delivered 4.1% of the 1,300-ton stockpile and may miss next week's deadline to ship all of its chemical agents out of the country. Syria is now 6 to 8 weeks behind its commitments.
This is not rocket science here. They're dragging their feet. We need them to pick up those feet and run with this and move forward in moving the chemical weapons stockpile to the port.
A day earlier, the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, in a written report to the Senate Select Intelligence Committee, said Russia and the chemical weapons deal it brokered had given the Assad regime legitimacy, a lifeline to stay in power. Clapper warned 7,000 foreign fighters were now operating in Syria, adding his concern that al-Qaeda could use Syria to launch a terror attack against the U.S.
We're seeing now the appearance of training complexes in Syria to train people to go back to their countries and of course, conduct more terrorist acts.
Civilian casualties in Syria continue to mount. In Aleppo, a 14-month-old girl was pulled from the rubble after being buried alive when Syrian warplanes struck her home prior to this week's peace talks in Geneva. The Syrians want more equipment such as sophisticated roadside bomb detection radar to deliver its chemical stores to awaiting naval vessels. Meanwhile, the U.S. vessel, the MV Cape Ray, which was configured to neutralize the Syrian chemical agents, left Norfolk Monday and is expected in Rota, Spain next week. It's the first time ever that countries have attempted to destroy mustard, sarin, and VX nerve gas at sea.
But U.S. defense officials say none of Syria's chemical stockpiles have yet arrived at the port in Italy where the MV Cape Ray is supposed to receive them. And that's because Bashar Assad is holding on to 96% of his chemical stockpile. Brett.
Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. Russia's counterterrorism agency has arrested 2 brothers suspected of assisting the suicide bombers who struck the southern city of Volgograd in late December. The bombings of a train station and trolley bus killed 34 people and wounded many others. Security fears are high ahead of the Winter Olympics in Sochi. Meanwhile, the U.S. has reportedly acknowledged that Russia tested a ground-launched cruise missile in apparent violation of a 1987 treaty. The New York Times reports the White House is not yet ready to declare the tests a violation of the treaty. The missile ban was a key tenet of the agreement that ended the Cold War. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham told Fox, quote, "This is just another example of Putin just sowing his oats." Still ahead, a look at the key races of 2014 so far. And first, just 3 days to the Super Bowl. 2 types of sales, a political message to a big audience, and a field day for counterfeiters. We'll be right back.